wanted to introduce you guys to, Miss Chicago herself, Vicky Silvano. She's going to have a couple words to talk about our upcoming convention in October.
Thanks, Justin, and giving me this opportunity to talk about and encourage people who are on this webinar right now to join us at our 20th anniversary. I was going to say wedding. 20th anniversary celebration of AREAA, right? Over time, we've gone through from birth to 20 years old, right? As you can see, our theme for the year is changing lives through real estate. And we have changed a lot of lives over the 20 years through our people or clients that we serve. We've changed lives with our leadership team. We've changed lives with all the people that we connect with in our network. For me, AREAA has changed me. It opened a lot of doors of opportunity of leadership. And I'm sure a lot of us have done that as well. And I'm sure you've done that as well, Justin. So I just wanted to pump you up, everyone. There will be 12 breakout sessions, 3 offsite sessions. And the offsite sessions are the architectural tour of Chicago that you don't want to miss. We have a luxury event at the Merchandise Mart, which is another great event. And we will be going to another iconic building where we'll be holding our Best of AREAA at the John Hancock building. So the hotel that we're going to be in, the Swiss Hotel, it's all ours for the 3 days that we're there. So as you know, AREAA is an advocacy organization, and we've advocated for a lot of different policies so that we can eradicate barriers to home ownership. And this is what we're celebrating on our 20th year, celebrating our wins, right? So check out the website, areaa.org/convention. Up till now, our AREAA registration tickets is at $399. We will be upping that price after the end of this month. So please go ahead and register soon. Our hotel is almost sold out. So I'm anticipating over 1,500. My goal is 1,600. I always want to break records. So 1,600 people from all across the country. And I know we have a lot of international attendees as well. And during this session, during the event, we will also have a commercial session that we're still putting together with Justin. So watch out for that. And we have a CCIM course ongoing. So we are open, and we are looking forward to all the sessions and the celebrations, and bringing together the AREAA family soon. So October 12 to 14 at the Swiss Hotel in Chicago. Thank you, Justin.
Awesome. Thank you, Vicky. Appreciate your time as always. And so to our attendees, let's go ahead and get started. So good morning, good afternoon. Once again, my name is Justin Wong. I'm your AREAA National Commercial Chair, presenting our webinar entitled New Strategies in Sustainable Development. And for those that are checking out AREAA or this webinar for the first time, what is AREAA? AREAA is the Asian Real Estate Association of America, dedicated to promoting sustainable homeownership opportunities in the AAPI community, creating a strong, powerful national voice for housing and real estate professionals that serve this dynamic market. Having said that, since we've been around, we're the largest trade organization for real estate professionals in the AAPI community, expanding between, I believe, 43 chapters and over 17,000 members. And so with that being said, for AREAA, this is a webinar where I have Dan Choi. He's not only on our commercial committee, but he's going to be our panelist. He's going to be our go-to expert, talking about other means for sustainable housing. So I'll go ahead, and before I introduce Dan Choi to make his presentation, for those that are on the Zoom, there is a Q&A feature right on the bottom of your screen. So during the presentation, if any questions come up that you'd like to have addressed, please go ahead and put it on the Q&A feature. And after the presentation, I'll go ahead and try my best to get all the questions out for Dan to address. So let me see if we have no other questions from there. I'll go ahead and introduce Dan. So Dan Choi, like I mentioned before, he's on our National Commercial Committee, but he's an award-winning architect with over 20 years of experience as an architect and as a developer. He's also the founder of Lagos Developments, a real estate development firm. Prior to establishing Dan Choi Architect, he was a development manager at Douglaston Development, where he oversaw large-scale mixed-use projects in New York City. Dan was also a partner at the renowned architectural firm FUKSAS and has worked at offices of Somm, Perkins and Will, and Rem Koolhaas Oma. In terms of education, Dan has received his Master of Science in Real Estate Developments at Columbia University and has his Bachelor of Architecture at Cornell University. Currently, right now, he is on the American Institute of Architects Task Force Advisory Board for the Council of Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat, obviously AREAA, and a committee chair for FIOPSI at Gen X Design and Technology. So, Dan, I know I've been talking this whole time. I'll go ahead and give you the floor.
All right, thank you, Justin. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to share my thoughts on new strategies in sustainable real estate development. I'm going to share my screen now.
Yep, the floor is yours.
You could see it?
Crystal clear.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 5 new strategies in sustainable real estate development: modular construction, mass timber buildings, 3D printed buildings, adaptive reuse, and artificial intelligence in real estate investing. So the first one is modular construction. As many of you know, modular construction has a long history in this country, but there's a resurgence. There's a huge demand in construction for housing, both multifamily and single family, but the construction labor, there's a great shortage on the labor. And so what's happening is we don't have as many construction workers. We have a high demand in supply. The land price and the material price are going up, and so there's a squeeze there. One of the solutions to this is modular construction, and you could see in this photograph that they're building these modules or rooms of a multifamily building or a single family home indoors in a controlled space in a warehouse, just like the way we make cars. They're starting to automate a lot of the processes, and they use a lot of the tools and techniques of the automotive industry, which is assembly line, precise manufacturing, indoor quality control testing and inspections. Some of the reasons why, and so it's, you need less people to build these out. Go to the next slide. Here you could see them being stacked on top of each other for a multifamily construction, just like Legos. And the construction cost is similar to traditional build, but it's twice the speed of a traditional build. And one of the major reasons is, you still need to build these concrete foundations to hold up this multifamily building or a house. And so what you do is you get the foundations and the site work done at the same time as the module is being built indoors off-site. And so as soon as the foundations are done, these are trucked in one by one and just stacked on top of each other like Legos. And so you could greatly reduce the construction period, and as you know, greatly reduce the interest cost for the construction loan that you get. Also, obviously, while you do the foundations work, your Department of Buildings and your local jurisdiction could come to the offsite factory and do the necessary required inspections, testing, and reporting. There's a confusion about the terms prefab versus modular. Prefab basically means that it's just made before getting to the site. So you could think of them as components, whereas modular speaks more about modules or a proportionate system that could be stacked and locked into place. You could see here in this picture. So prefab, you could make prefab bathrooms, prefab kitchens, prefab walls. Modular talks more about these volumetric rooms. And so you could have prefab parts within a modular construction. The other thing that's great about modular construction is the flexibility. You could almost envision this building just adding more of these modules. Sorry about that. More of these modules, or contracting or shrinking, or you could even pick them up and move them to another place, another site. Or when the building is done being used, let's say after 50 years, you could just move them to another location. And so this idea of a circular economy is in place. The next topic is mass timber buildings. This is kind of a very interesting, also pretty old construction technique, but there's like a revival of it right now. And the reason why that is because of something called carbon sequestering. Wood is basically embodied carbon. So as we all know, plants and especially trees absorb carbon dioxide from the air. It gets moved into its trunk and branches and releases oxygen. And so with this crisis with carbon dioxide, the idea is to plant a lot of sustainable forestry, cut down trees, make them into prefabricated beams and columns for our buildings, and then just repurpose them every time. So what we're doing is trapping carbon from the air and then basically making buildings and housing and houses throughout our cities around the world, trapping the carbon into our buildings. And the one thing you don't want to do is burn the wood or bury the wood, because that would release the carbon into the atmosphere. It's also faster than traditional construction because of the same reasons. It's prefabricated modules and parts, columns and beams and walls and floors. And then also 90% less traffic because of the prefabricated nature of basically, like, they're just large Lincoln logs that are just trucked to the site and assembled. They're just as structurally strong for earthquake and hurricane and high wind resistance as steel and concrete, but it's a fraction of the weight because it's wood. And so what you get is much lighter building, much cheaper foundations. It's also counterintuitive, but it's actually very fire resistant, just like large tree trunks. These are pieces of lumber that are glued together to create something called mass timber. And it's more predictable actually under fire than steel. When steel is under fire, like in the World Trade Center, there's an unpredictable nature of how it buckles, whereas with mass timber components, there's a very high level of predictability because they're engineered components. Also, the outside layer gets charred first and blackened and protects the inside, so that's why it's also very predictable. The next interesting topic is 3D printed buildings. And you guys probably have started to hear and see some of these images because they're brand new and very fresh. This is a company called Icon, joint venturing with a very large single family home developer called Lennar. This is in Texas. 3D printing, basically, as you can see, is a very large printing machine that, instead of printing ink like our home printers, they're printing little beads of concrete. And, you know, obviously there are a lot of advantages. One is that it's very fast and scalable. This is a real picture of Lennar's development. They basically print out all the walls, the interior walls, the exterior walls, by itself and automated. And then you simply put on a roof after the printing. This is also good for scale. If let's say you need to do 500 to 1,000 of these single family homes, all with different designs, you just put it in the program and then it runs by itself. The other end of the spectrum is that you could make super customized and complex shapes, because, you know, this is just printing things out through a machine. And so you bypass all the traditional construction techniques. Here's a real photograph in Saudi Arabia with one of its sheikhs of an innovative building. We could print out building forms and shapes that we can't actually build traditionally. It's also very sustainable because it's only printing exactly what we need, and so there's no material waste. And it's very, very cost effective, because obviously, as you may know, half the construction cost is human labor. And so if you remove humans, you basically reduce the cost of construction by half. It's also automated. And so one person could manage the construction of many homes or even apartment buildings and multifamily projects. This also lends itself well for low-income communities, affordable housing projects in the developing world. And so because it's using traditional materials like concrete and cement, these machines and printers could be shipped anywhere around the world, South America, Africa, Southeast Asia, and the developing nations, and just print these out without any human intervention. And some of you guys might know also that this is the method that they're actually focusing on for printing, creating buildings on Mars and the moon. So the idea is that we would ship these printers up there, and it would take the local soil, mix it with our additives, and create 3D printed housing and structures on other planets, because we can't ship materials to other planets. Adaptive reuse is obviously very much in vogue right now. It's obviously very sustainable. You could save up to 80% fewer tons of carbon emissions than just demolishing, designing, and developing a new property. It takes about 65 years for an energy efficient new building to save the same amount of energy lost in demolishing an existing building. And so saving these older buildings is very sustainable. Obviously, there's no new materials being used. You're just repurposing the old structure. Here is a photograph of a office building converted to multifamily. This is the top floor of the amenities floor, where the fitness and the tenant lounges. There's a big focus on conversion of office buildings to multifamily in our cities, as 50% of our office buildings are still vacant, and there's no sign that they're going to be being filled up anytime soon.
Sounds like the Bay Area.
The Bay Area, yeah, it's a problem with every major city, even New York City. And the first projects to go are Class B and C vintage office buildings that were developed from the 70s to the 90s, because it seems like Class A, super nice new office buildings are doing somewhat well. But it's a good thing, because Class B and Class C office buildings lend themselves well to conversions to residential, multifamily, or condo towers. And the reason for that is because the size of the floor between the least span between the core or the elevators are to the window wall is much longer for an office building than it is for residential or hotel. But they used to design them more shallow in the 80s and 90s and the 70s. And so they lend themselves well to just making them back or making them into apartment buildings or hotels. If you wanted to convert like a recent office building, their lease spans are way deeper. And so it would be very hard to convert them to multifamily or hotel. The other great thing that we all love about historic and old buildings is that we can't build buildings like we used to. One of the main reasons why is because labor for construction a long time ago was obviously much cheaper. And so we can't actually afford to recreate a lot of these beautiful old buildings with the cornices and the sculptures and the pilasters and all of that. And so if you could find an old building and repurpose it and to bring out the historic splendor of the architectural details and the charm that comes with it, obviously you could capture great value. This is an image of the Nomad Hotel in London that was repurposing, I believe, a brewery, the elegant hotel conversion. Also, it's a sustainable in terms that you know, we all complain about how every modern architecture, airport and building and downtown all around the world starting to look the same. You can't tell where you are anymore because everything's just a glass skyscraper or like a gray airport. And so to keep these older buildings kind of keeps the history of the place, gives it a sense of place, gives it a soul, helps the city maintain its identity, and for future generations to kind of understand what the history of that place was, instead of just knocking it down and making a new, you know, glass building. Lastly, artificial intelligence in real estate. As we all know, you know, it's like the hot topic right now, and obviously has huge implications in our industry. This is not more about the physical building of commercial real estate, but more about perhaps acquisitions, investing in portfolios, or even buying a single family home. So right now, because of ChatGPT and other companies, major companies, there's a lot of smaller prop tech companies that are piggybacking off the AI of ChatGPT and Google and Facebook and whatnot. And so there's a huge emergence of prop tech using AI. And some of the more interesting ones, at least in the prop tech investor space, is predictive analytics. So it basically, you know, analyzes trillions of points of data, economic indicators, demographics, even social media sentiments, weather, property values, supply and demand. And it could basically tell you when to buy, where to buy, when to sell, and how much to pay for it. Just going through all the data and removing all the emotions out of it. You know, it would analyze way more than a human investor could analyze, studying everything that has any kind of data point, and it helps you to inform and negotiate the proper price for it. You could maybe even predict the future price valuations based on the market and the submarket. It would help you with risk assessment. So especially with, like, you know, what's going on with the climate change, you know, it might even be able to start to understand weather patterns and the chances and the risks of storms or damage to your property, legal implications, and so it would help you address it. And then finally, AI will actually, you could find companies right now that uses AI to help tailor make purchases for portfolios or asset classes or certain jurisdictions, just like the way AI recommends, movies and TV shows on your Netflix or what to see on your social media feed. It could start to tailor make what type of investor financial profile you have, what market trends you like, certain property performance data points that you believe in, your risk tolerance, your goals, and create recommendations for you to buy, sell, or hold properties. And that's it.
Okay, awesome. Appreciate the presentation, Dan.
Yeah.
Anything. Well, a couple things to take in. I had no idea that 3D prints was actually being put on a larger scale for construction. I still remember, shoot, it was like a year ago. One of my friends got a 3D printer and he printed like a Pokemon Charmander little toy thing for me. And now you're actually seeing 3D printing on a larger scale, which is crazy. And
Yeah.
then I think last quarter in Vallejo, I checked out a company that I saw on site, them making modular units from the ground up, going back from the foundation to the plumbing, very much silico, and they mentioned that they make, I don't know, somewhere like 15-20 units a day, which is insane. So but yeah, let's go ahead and get into the Q&A part of this event. If you want to stop sharing your screen, you can. If not,
Yeah.
no worries, Dan. So for those that are on the Zoom, feel free to ask some questions away. We'll try to get to it. But if not, I do have a couple follow-up questions from this presentation. Okay, Dan. So, going back to all these new methods of construction, going back to timber, 3D prints, the modular, as I mentioned before. I mean, the governments, lenders, especially with any new methodology, especially for a process that's traditional as construction, I kind of think it's not the same, but I do remember, obviously, with cannabis being an emerging trade in the markets, lenders they don't lend, or they don't know how to view it. The same thing with the government. I mean, when it comes to something that's being introduced into the markets, let alone real estate, I mean, how do you think the government and lenders are really, viewing this, whether it's development or just lending on it? I mean, what do you see?
Yeah, right. That's a great question. Well, first of all, just like on a high level, I think everyone is kind of, worried about multiple major existential crises. First is the environmental crises. So anything that helps with a sustainable future, sustainable construction, reduction of carbon emissions, I think just on a high level, it's they're going to try to help figure out a way to get any of these practices to move forward. The second is the housing crisis across the world. Demand is high, supply is low, or good supply is low, and the construction of the supply is quite high. And so we need to all figure out ways to make this faster and cheaper and more high quality to the masses all around the world, not only developed countries, but developing countries. And so there is that. The nuances are quite nuanced, obviously. The first, let's talk about all three of them. First is, what we talk about first, modular construction. Modular has been around for a while, and there's modular multifamily construction, which is, big apartment buildings that I showed you, versus, let's say, modular homes or ADUs. There are a lot of companies coming back on the market now, or creating new companies to make these assembly line type of approach construction in-house, indoors. And the lending space, everyone knows modular, it's not that hard to wrap your head around. There are pros and cons. The banks certain banks won't lend to it. Maybe it's more regional banks or kind of more specialty bank that might lend to first a modular home buyer, so one that already exists, or a private citizen that wants to make or buy a modular home that doesn't exist, but they own the land. And then there's the third one, which is a commercial real estate developer making a multifamily modular building. All three have nuances, but I would say for at least the multifamily development project, you know, some banks like it because it's quality control. It's like a car. They actually go to the actual warehouses to check to see how it's going, because you know, you have to fund the construction of it. It's easier to do a walk through in a warehouse. Things are controlled. Also, the Department of Buildings that gives the permit and the inspections and the testing and the reporting, it's easier because it's also in a building, and you don't have to go to a construction site. So there are things that they like. Obviously, the things that they don't like are, you know, it's still not widespread use. It's still kind of a nascent, idiosyncratic type of construction. It is becoming more and more mainstream as more and more people talk about it, and more people deploy it, and more companies are created for it. The 3D printing space is brand new and very hard to wrap a lender to wrap their head around it. It's very high risk. There are like 3D printing companies also have financial services to maybe give you financing for your 3D printed home. Or these 3D printed companies are seen as tech disruptors. You know, think Tesla or Uber or something like that. So their valuations are quite high because of the future market that they could take over. And so they have a lot of investor money, and so they could provide financial services for that. Timber construction is getting very there's a very buzzword type of construction now. And so actually New York City, which is considered quite conservative in its permitting and the way they allow to make buildings here, is the most conservative from my viewpoint. They just allowed timber construction recently of May of this year. And so so now it's in the International Building Code, the residential code, in architecture. There the inspections and the reporting has been done. It's deemed safe and perfectly fine to use. And so many cities, all the major cities, adopted timber construction for up to 8 stories, I believe 10 stories. But there's you know, Milwaukee has the tallest timber tower in the world that got recently built. So it's rapidly being absorbed and adopted by many cities and jurisdictions and countries.
Great. We have one question from the audience from Tony.
Sure.
He's asking more specifically for your firm, you know, what kind of activities do you guys engage to address new infrastructures that are designed to be zero emission environments to support affordable housing, rather than obviously your old, you know, traditional infrastructure, you know, to help the existing population and the future. You know, what is your firm doing in particular?
Right. So I am a LEED certified architect and developer on the highest level. It's called BD+C, Building Design and Construction. I had to take many courses and tests to get there. So and I've been designing and developing LEED certified silver and platinum and gold buildings in my career. So I'm well versed in sustainable architecture, and there's, you know, 1,000 things to do to be a sustainable architect. So I am always cognizant as an architect to deploy and employ sustainable practices. In terms of the affordable housing, I am not specifically an affordable housing developer. Affordable housing development is a very specific niche real estate development sector and asset class that you have to be very specialized in because of the very complex and many levels of layers of tax incentive programs and financing systems in place to make that work, and it's very, very complex. And very, you have to be in that specific asset class to be building affordable housing, which I'm not a part of.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's very complex.
Yeah, yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah.
And now, going back to these different methods, modular units, 3D prints, I mean, in respect to the rest of the world, I saw your slides, especially for the 3D print. You had a couple of really cool buildings that I don't think are in the United States, but in terms of the United States, I mean, kind of where are we in regards to the rest of the world on this sort of construction, and where do you see the US in the next couple of years? Obviously, you mentioned that we have a need for it,
Right.
forecast down the road. And, feel free to tell me about your own deals that are happening in the country.
Right. So the 3D space, that image of Icon is an American company. Lennar, everyone knows Lennar. It's the biggest home builder in America. They're obviously taking a leap of faith and building hundreds of these 3D printed homes with Icon, and those are two American companies. I do know that some of the 3D printing companies, the companies that make the machines, the printing machines, several of them are from Europe and Germany. So, but they sell them around the world. Icon, I believe, is an American company. But yeah, America is very, believes in innovation and disruption and new practices. And Americans love new things. So we're always trying new things. Perhaps a little bit more, the adoption is quicker than Europe or Asia, perhaps. On the timber constructions front, yeah, it's being absorbed really quickly in the US, in Scandinavia, Switzerland, and Australia. Yeah, places with good forestry practices and the demand for these types of buildings. Modular construction, actually Asia Pacific is leading the front on that. So China, Japan, Korea, all the major conglomerates, I believe, have their own modular companies experimenting with modular construction. America also has a long history of modular, and most recently Katerra, that was being very ambitious, backed by SoftBank, went under, just like WeWork, but it at least shows a desire for this country to see if we could do modular on a major scale. For my own practice, I am connected to a new modular company called Assembly. It's a tech-based company, and their disruption is that just like Dell computers, OEM style, you buy the bathroom pods from Brazil, you buy the structural system from Istanbul, Turkey, you buy your kitchens from South Korea, and just using just logistical systems and the global supply trade routes, you could organize the delivery of these major prefabricated components on site or to your warehouse and assembled, just like like a Dell computer or any real kind of complex a product, right, that has components built from all different parts of the world. And so they want to do that instead of building it all themselves in a warehouse. They're trying to kind of use AI and project management and procurement management systems to kind of get the best products for the cheapest at the fastest place, and then just kind of assemble it like a kit of parts on site. So yeah, that's what I'm involved with right now. I'm very excited about it.
Nice. Where do you see I guess the United States in the future with all this? Do you think it's going to increase? Do you think it's going to stay stable?
Yeah, definitely. So Biden actually Biden actually approved of a major act. I forget what it was called. IRA maybe. It's an infrastructure bill, $1 trillion or something. There are grants and money and loans, all just to service this world, sustainable practices in construction, new green technologies, green energy. There's a huge push under the Biden administration right now, and real dollars approved to be spent on these types of practices now. And I mean, obviously, we're not as fast and gung-ho about it as Europe, EU, but we are like right behind them. So yeah.
Okay. You got any deals, right now or in the past that, obviously, modular units and whatnot, right now?
Right now I'm talking to that company on a project in Tennessee and New York, but things are still, I mean, the development environment right now in the country is not the best because of the interest rates, construction costs, and just the kind of uncertainty in the commercial real estate sector. And so things are where people are talking about projects. I'm doing several projects, value add projects, and traditional construction projects, but none of these practices yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe more so on the adaptive reuse. I know that's been hot in the downtown, like you mentioned. Has that been?
Oh, right. Adaptive reuse. Yeah, definitely. I'm
Right.
looking at 2 major projects in Chicago, actually. Office buildings to be converted to multifamily potentially.
Okay.
There's a lot of it's starting, you're going to start to see super distressed office buildings where it's basically empty. It's tens to hundreds of millions of dollars of carried costs. Just banks are taking it. They don't even want it. You could buy office buildings pennies on the dollar now. And like I said, with adaptive reuse, if you could reposition it into apartments or hotels or mixed use, there's great opportunity there. These types of environments don't really come that often in one's lifetime.
No, I'd say it's generational.
Yeah, and in the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to see a lot of distressed office buildings.
Yeah. All right, let's flip it more on the trendy side. Artificial intelligence, AI, ChatGPT, all that fun stuff that you see on social media right now. You mentioned kind of similar to Netflix about, based off your taste or the circumstances, you have AI to kind of help circumvent the process. And just thinking about that for real estate, I mean, the future, your thoughts on artificial intelligence for real estate.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I'm not directly involved with AI companies or software. I am excited about getting into some of these companies I was talking about, the analytics companies, and me just being a real estate operator owner, helping to understand new submarkets very quickly. It's a tool right now. Will it replace real estate investors in the future? I'm not sure. The one interesting thing that I read a while back during the pandemic was who's the guy that founded OpenAI? ChatGPT.
I know who you're talking about. I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah. Anyway, he wrote a manifesto. He became the owner or the CEO or the president of OpenAI in the middle of the pandemic, and he released his thesis on AI. And he basically said that AI will, in the very near future, take over basically all white and blue collar jobs, releasing a certain type of utopia in the near future. But like the one thing that AI cannot do or take over is this idea of they could take your job, but they can't really take your property. So like land has inherent physical real value. It's called real estate, real assets. And so the idea of buying property is a hedge against the AI takeover potentially. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It feels very well. You guys watch a lot of sci-fi. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No,
I mean, I think general AI, this kind of like scary movie type of scenario is very far, maybe, I don't know, 30 to 50 years away.
yeah,
But during that time to get there, it's going to act as like a really great tool to leverage your own knowledge and capacity for assessing real estate, purchasing real estate, selling real estate, holding, investing, things like that. So these companies are pretty new,
yeah.
and they're going to get smarter and faster and more tailor-made, and will be a great tool for all of us, I believe.
Right on. Thank you. Thank you. Last question that I have top of mind, construction's still getting done. There's the newer construction, like you mentioned before. Um, modular, it's cookie cut, I'm not gonna lie about that. And then there's the old traditional style, the craftsmanship, and you're an architect, and you can appreciate, some of the originalities of architecture, obviously.
Mhm.
Do you see new construction just completely overtaking the traditional in the future? I mean, I understand the need for housing, but where do you see construction going down the road?
You mean new buildings versus keeping old buildings?
Yeah, I'd say that. I mean, do you think I don't know. We're gonna continue to trend for new construction modular. Doesn't even have to be modular. Or
Mhm.
maybe the traditional. All right, let me rephrase that question. I guess there's the traditional way of construction, and obviously it's not the best in regards to emissions and whatnot. And then there's the new age construction that you're illustrating. I mean,
Mhm.
there's pros and cons with both.
Mhm.
The pros with the traditional style is you can obviously customize and have that sort of craftsmanship. Obviously, if you have the capital, but
Mhm.
what are your thoughts about the pros and cons between both methods, and do you see one trending more towards, or I guess do you see new construction trending higher, or do you think people are still going to stay the same way because they like their craftsmanship, they like customization, they like nice architecture in that sense, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I think the new construction methods that I described aren't necessarily going to be the cookie cutter boring stuff like you saw with the 3D printing. If anything, it might be able to create things that even an AI architect will design, things that humans can't think of, and
Oh,
then have 3D printer print something spectacular, right?
yeah.
We didn't even talk about that, how AI is becoming architects.
Oh,
Yeah, so we can't even imagine what if there's, once AI architects start to come on board and design for us things that we humans can't really even imagine, and have an AI 3D printer print these out. That could be super interesting.
wow.
I mean, the problem is human labor. The construction is like the same as it was during like the pyramids, right? Like they're putting bricks on their back and they're walking down the site, and one by one, brick by one brick, they're just putting them down, right? And
Yep.
nailing stuff. We're still nailing stuff on site. It's all very raw and like hasn't changed for thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
But nobody in our generation and younger wants to do that stuff anymore.
Mhm.
Nobody wants to do it. And so there's a drastic shortage of construction laborers in this
Ah,
country, the first world countries. And so we need to find a solution. So we're going to have to move towards these automated systems, because the fact is nobody wants to. I mean, there's a lot of immigrants from developing worlds that are willing to take on these jobs. But even, I mean, I guess with AI disrupting many sectors, including construction and automation and design and engineering, we might be seeing much cheaper construction because it's automated or designed and constructed by AI. That's my guess. Obviously it's going to take many decades for all of this to be deployed. But people also still love old buildings. maybe in reaction to the kind of scariness of AI and our future
Yeah.
move so quickly, like living in an old 17th century brewery building feels good to you. I don't know. Or, you know, like I don't want to be like this soulless glass skyscraper class A office building. Google moves into like a huge, you know, warehouse building in the meatpacking district. And they do that, right? So it's a combination of all of that, I believe. And in emerging nations, India, China, they all have beautiful buildings themselves. And so, you know, hopefully they'll all learn about adaptive reuse, preserving their heritage, their old buildings, being precise about what to keep, what to destroy, and redevelop, things like that. So yeah, I think it's an overall exciting future.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, and I can appreciate that. There's no absolute answer, obviously.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you know, I know we're 56. Okay, so we're pretty much about done in regards to this program. Dan, once again, thank you so much for your time and expertise. It's been an honor having you on the panel and having you a part of the AREAA Commercial Committee. Looking forward to seeing you at Chicago for convention. And to our attendees as well, hopefully we can see you at Chicago. You know, feel free to, what we'll probably do after this is, you know, for this presentation, you know, we're going to go ahead and email that to all our attendees, and we have this recorded as well for future references, because, you know, affordable housing and the need for it, and, you know, with everything that's going on in the country, it's an ongoing issue that I don't think it's going to necessarily dissipates until you know, we make proactive solutions to it. So
well, thank you so much, Justin, for having me.
Dan, did you have anything else, any other closing words top of mind?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for being such a great leader. Thank you everyone for listening to the lecture, and feel free to email or call or text me questions or things you want to talk about or learn more about in these sectors.
Okay, excellent. So once again, guys, thank you so much for your time. Have a great week, and hopefully we'll see you in Chicago. Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.